Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today to introduce my article. My name is Fang Sirui, a PhD student from the School of Humanities, University Sains, Malaysia. Well, the title of my article is Chinese-ism and the Female Agency of Chinese Female Characters in Lisa C's Peony in Love. Firstly, I would like to introduce the background of my article. Lisa C. is an American Chinese author. She was born in 1995 in Paris and grew up in an American Chinese family, and her great-grandfather was once the godfather of Los Angeles Chinatown. Different from other famous American Chinese female authors like Maxine Hong Kingston and Amy Tan. Lisa C's focus is not limited to the cultural conflicts of modern American Chinese, but also on the long-standing Chinese culture and history. From 1995 to 2021, Lisa C has published 12 novels, including On God Mountain, Flower Net, Dragon Bones, Snowflower and the Sacred Vine, Peony in Love, and so on. On God Mountain was adapted into an opera and released in 2005, and Snowflower and the Sacred Vine was adapted into a successful film in 2011. Among all these books, I chooses the Peony in Love as the object of my study because this novel is a real supernatural novel with a completely traditional Chinese background in the realm of American Chinese supernatural novels. Peony in Love tells the story of three Chinese wives of a Chinese man writing a book review together in the early Qing dynasty of ancient China. The first wife, Peony, and the second wife, Tanze, haunt the family after their deaths, but they and the third wife, Qianyi, finally reconcile with each other and complete their book together. This story is full of supernatural elements such as ghost marriage, spirit possessing, exorcism, and Taoist priest. In this novel, I consider the ethnic cultures of the Han people and the Manchu people in the Ming Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty as the cultural unconscious, as well as the traditional Chinese women's morality and Chinese wisdom are parts of the cultural unconscious. Lisa Z adapts the identity dilemma of American Chinese women to the identity confusion of a Han girl living in the Manchu dominant Qing dynasty and shows the character's female consciousness. Also, the plot of this book, the plot of Peony in Love, is similar to the famous traditional Chinese work named The Peony Paphilia, written by Tang Xianzu in 1598. The female protagonist Peony died because of love and reading the Peony Paphilia in Lisa C's work. Different from the Peony Paphilia, Peony in Lisa C's work does not resurrect in the end. Then I would like to introduce the religion, the Chinese Oism, which I contend is part of the cultural unconscious of female characters and a part of ethnic culture. Chinese Oism is a female-centric primitive Chinese religion and is popular during the pre-Qing period in ancient China. Proven by Chinese folklorists, the responsibilities of Chinese wisdom can be divided into 7 types, such as communicating with gods and ghosts, interpreting dreams, making a prophecy, exorcising evil spirits, curing illness, praying for rain, and expelling disasters. These works are mainly made by female shamans. When the preaching period came to an end, female shamans and female-centric Chinese-Wisdom were replaced by male-dominant Confucianism and Taoism. Through controlling the historical records and making adequate, male Confucian intellectuals gradually replaced the female shamans to become the center of official rituals. Meanwhile, professional doctors also took over the responsibility of shamans in curing illness. Wisdom's responsibility of praying for rain, provising, and eliminating demons and evil ghosts were inherited by Taoist priests. So, female-centric Chinese wisdom and female shamans were replaced by male-dominant religions and men in Chinese history. Women lost their identity as powerful shamans in Chinese history. Even in the Peony in Love, we can see the female protagonist loses her identity to become a hungry ghost after death. Although she gains supernatural power, she loses her identity in her family and society because she wants to break the gender norms. So she is not accepted by the traditional Chinese patriarchal society. This is a kind of historical memory, a kind of cultural unconscious in Chinese people's psyche, that is the marginalization of powerful women in Chinese history. Well, the second part is my theory. I mainly use Samuel Kimball's and Gu Mingdong's cultural unconscious theory. Kimball develops Joseph Henderson's definition of cultural unconscious, considering this cultural unconscious is the intermediate basic level that lies between the archetypal layer of the psyche and the personal layer. According to Kimball and Henderson, the cultural unconscious refers to historical memories and ethnic culture that will uh, that will influence individuals' identity and behaviors. In order to discuss how cultural unconscious affects people, Kimball develops a concept of cultural complex. The cultural complex is an expression of a dynamic system of relations that serve the basic individual need for belonging and identity through linking personal experiences and group expectations, and is based on repetitive historical group experiences which have taken root in the cultural unconscious of the group. The secondary theory I use is the theory of Gu Mingdong. He is an American Chinese scholar. Gu developed the theory of Kimball and Henderson to think the cultural unconscious is the cultivated unconscious, meaning that the individual's unconscious minds, behaviors, and identities are cultivated by the culture through education. He uses the process of acculturation to explain his concept. The acculturation has two stages: the first cultural acquisition and the second cultural learning. Both learning processes will affect and cultivate individuals' identities. Then I use Lois Magnay's concept to understand the female agency, and uses Altner's theory to explore the different types of how the female characters exercising female agency, including outright rebellion, subtle everyday resistance, and complex and ambivalent acceptance of dominant categories and practice but always change. I consider the last complex acceptance as a kind of negotiation. Well, let's see my research objectives. The main purpose of my article is using theories of the cultural unconscious. This article aims to examine how the female characters exercise female agency to rediscover the female-centric supernatural world under the influence of Chinese Oism in Peony in Love. There are three following objectives. The first is to discuss how the Chinese Oism is reflected in the supernatural world. The second is to analyze how the Chinese Oism and other ethnic cultural elements affect the behaviors and identity of female characters. The third is to examine how female characters exercise female agency in different ways to negotiate their ethnic and gender identities. These are four examples. Firstly, Peony follows the gender norms to dress, eat, act, and foot binding. This means that her behaviors and minds are affected by traditional Chinese women's morality, which is a kind of cultural unconscious. And by reading the Peony Pavilion and traveling the underworld, Peony learns about the family secret of how her grandmother and mothers saved men in the war. Through the learning process, her gender perception is changed. The last example is about Peony and Tanzi attempt to exclude each other by supernatural power to maintain their central status in their marriages. This is an example of exercising female agency, an example of outright rebellion and subtle everyday resistance. And the third wife, Qianyi, in The Peony in Love, is an example of complex acceptance and negotiation. Because Qianyi accepts her husband's another two wives and seems to accept the Chinese women's morality, but she also negotiates with other two wives, her husband and gender norms in order to gain the right to write books and speak for women with the allowance of Chinese traditional society. Well, the last part is my outline. The first, I intend to introduce Chinese Oism and American Chinese supernatural narratives first, and then explain the theories. Thirdly, I intend to analyze how Peony in Love reflects the features and inner logical of Chinese Oism through the behaviors and minds of female characters. The inner logic of Chinese Oism is exclusion, excluding ghosts and evil supernatural beings, also exclude others. At last, I intend to analyze different types of exercising female agency of female characters, such as, for example, Peony makes outright rebellion at first and then negotiate with others. Tanzi makes subtle resistance at first and then makes outright rebellion after death. Qianyi chooses to negotiate and accept with gender norms and others. Well, that's all. Thank you. Hope my presentation makes sense.